The Carl Rogers video that we watched intrigued me, and that is why I chose Carl Rogers as the subject for my video presentation. His theories were more complex because he was building on so many other theorists before him. The authors of our text, Theories of Personality, gave Rogers a good critique regarding useful theory. The fact that we use client-centered therapy and group therapy today to treat patients is because of Carl Rogers. There may be other methods to treat psychological problems, but it seems if you go see a counselor or a psychologist, you're going to sit in a chair or in a group therapy session. It is amazing that his experiment has become so popular as a treatment method. Carl Rogers was born in Oak Park, Illinois on January 8, 1902. He was born the fourth of 6 children, and his parents were Walter and Julie Rogers. He was extremely shy and had very few friends. Rogers' parents were devoutly religious, and this influenced his young life greatly. He was reading the Bible and other books before he was even in preschool. His desire was to be a farmer, but as he grew older and enrolled at the University of Wisconsin, he became more interested in religious studies. During Rogers' third year of college, he attended a student religious conference in China. Many other young religious students attended the conference. Rogers was influenced by their liberalism and became a much more liberal thinker as a result of the conference. Rogers received his B.A. from the University of Wisconsin in 1924. In August of that same year, he marries Helen Elliott. After graduating from the University of Wisconsin in the fall of 1924, he enrolled at the Union Theological Seminary in New York. By 1926, he had become very disenchanted with religion and enrolled at Columbia University Teachers College. At that point, he changed his major to clinical and educational psychology. During those years, he and his wife were blessed on May 17, 1926, with the birth of David Elliott Rogers. Natalie Rogers was born on October 9, 1928. On June 1, 1927, Rogers received his M.A. from Columbia University Teachers College. In 1928, Rogers' theories began to be formed when he joined the Rochester Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children as a child psychologist. On page 311, our text tells us, Rogers spent 12 years at Rochester, working at a job that might easily have isolated him from a successful academic career. He had harbored a desire to teach in a university after a rewarding teaching experience during the summer of 1935 at Teachers College and after having taught classes in sociology at the University of Rochester. During this period, he wrote his first book, The Clinical Treatment of the Problem Child, the publication of which led to a teaching offer from Ohio State University. So in 1940, he and his family moved to Columbus to start as a full professor there. As he taught his graduate students at Ohio State University, Rogers eventually conceptualized his psychotherapy ideas and in 1942 published Counseling and Psychotherapy. Rogers did not know that the book would be so controversial. The book minimized the causes of disturbances and labeling disorders, all the while emphasizing the importance of growth of an individual. In 1944, Rogers returned to New York to become the director of counseling with the USO, or the United States Organization. After a year, he took a position with the University of Chicago and opened a counseling center and was able to do research on the process and outcome of psychotherapy. While Rogers was at the University of Chicago, the Chicago studies were done. Although the Chicago studies were effective and showed that individuals in client-centered therapy did show improvement from therapy, however, they did not reach the optimum congruence of the highest phase. The conclusion was that client-centered therapy is effective, but did not result in a fully functioning person. According to the text, the years 1945 to 1957 at Chicago were the most productive and creative of his career. Rogers' therapy evolved from one that emphasized methodology, or what in the early 1940s was called the non-directive approach, to one in which the sole emphasis was on the client-therapist relationship. Our text continues to say, as the scientist, Rogers, along with his students and colleagues, produced groundbreaking research on the process and effectiveness of psychotherapy. In 1961, On Becoming a Person was published. Carl Rogers had a major global influence. He authored and co-authored many books and traveled to many parts of the world, including Europe, Latin America, Russia, Japan, and South America to facilitate person-centered approach workshops. In January of 1987, Rogers was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Congressman Jim Bates. Rogers died on February 4th, 1987, and here are some events that occurred after his death. Many books were published, such as the Carl Rogers Reader, Carl Rogers Dialogues, Freedom to Learn, A Way of Being, Carl Rogers, The Quiet Revolutionary, and Oral History. The text tells us Rogers originally saw little need for a theory of personality, but under pressure from others and also to satisfy an inner need to be able to explain the phenomenon he was observing, he evolved his own theory, which was first tentatively expressed in his American Psychological Association presidential address. A website resource, Simply Psychology, stated, Carl Rogers was a humanistic psychologist and agreed with most of what Maslow said, but added that for a person to grow, they need an environment that provides them with genuineness, which is openness and self-disclosure, acceptance, being seen with unconditional positive regard, and empathy, being listened to and understood. According to an article from Psychology History, Rogers believed that it was important for the individual to learn to understand himself and make independent choices that are significant in understanding the problem. Rogers' client-centered therapy included two broad assumptions, formative tendency and actualizing tendency. The text defines formative tendency as the tendency for all matter, both organic and inorganic, to evolve from simpler to more complex forms. For the entire universe, a creative process rather than a disintegrative one is in operation. The text defines actualizing tendency as, with all humans and other animals and plants, to move toward completion or fulfillment of potentials. Rogers believed that people would fulfill their own optimal potential within themselves as long as they were in a state of congruence of their ideal or best self. He called this process self-actualization. Rogers believed that when an individual was self-actualizing, that individual was a fully functioning person. Rogers' theory also included the idea of self-concept, which included two components. One is how we perceive ourselves, or our organismic self, and our ideal self, which is who we want ourselves to be. Rogers believed that without awareness, the self-concept and the ideal self would not exist. Rogers used the term congruence and incongruence to refer to whether an individual had a good or bad self-concept. If an individual perceives himself well and is self-actualizing as a fully functioning person, he is considered to be congruent. Conversely, if he is not accurately reflecting himself in the self-actualizing process, he is considered to be incongruent. The text stated, Rogers postulated that in order for a therapeutic growth to take place, the following conditions are necessary and sufficient. First, an anxious or vulnerable client must come into contact with a congruent therapist who also possesses empathy and unconditional positive regard for that client. Next, the client must perceive these characteristics in the therapist. Finally, the contact between client and therapist must be of some duration. If the conditions of therapist congruence, unconditional positive regard, and empathy are present, then the process of therapeutic change will be set into motion. In critiquing Rogers' theory according to the 6 rules of useful theory, the text indicated that Rogers had a good, useful theory. It generated research. The rates on falsification were high because it was an if-then framework. His organization of knowledge can be extended to a relatively wide range of human personality. The guide for solution to practical problems was good. It was internally consistent, and it was parsimonious. The theory itself was unusually clear and economical, but some of the language was awkward and vague. The fact that today we primarily use client-centered therapy and group therapy to treat patients is because of Carl Rogers' research. There may be other methods to treat psychological problems, but it seems if you go see a counselor or a psychologist today, you are involved in client-centered therapy. It is amazing how his experiment has become so popular as a treatment method. Thank you.